Excel works, besides with numerical data, with text data. A spreadsheet, if it was full of numbers logically, it would be very difficult to comprehend, and it would be practically impossible for someone other than the person who built it, and even the person themselves, when they came back to the spreadsheet after some time, would probably be a bit lost and would lose quite a bit of time. For this reason, it is highly recommended that in spreadsheets we use, besides numerical data, text data that explain the different steps or different construction of the spreadsheet. For example, if we have quantities written here in different cells, logically numeric quantities, we must, or at least it is highly recommended that in an adjacent cell, we put the text that explains the data. For example, this can be nuts. A nut that I've manufactured, I have checked or used in different, for example, months. So in January I worked with 123 February nuts, in February with 423, etc. This is one way in which we will normally build spreadsheets, using text data as well as numeric data. And the text data, this too we will enter in the Excel cells. And Excel will also give us tools for working specifically with text data. Okay, text data, we can have labels for the numeric quantities or data in itself. For example, the data of a street, for example, Camino de Vera, no number. This, for example, could be the expression of a home address or an institution. For example, city names. This can be regarded as a data. If I have a list people or customers, collaborators, and the corresponding cities, I will then have the tools for selecting just those who live in Valencia or for classifying them by countries, etc. These are alphanumeric data, which have information which we need, and Excel will be able to work with them. Alphanumeric data can combine letters with figures. For example, this one, for example, fax. It is alphanumeric information that contains a series of figures. The fact that starts with a word or a letter, it already becomes a factoid alphanumeric. The same thing happened, for example, with the quantity 600. If I add the word euros, when I combine figures and letters, it would normally consider it as a text datum. How we recognize these text data, the data that Excel recognizes as text data, we know which they are because Excel adjusts them to the left margin of the cell. All the data that is adjusted to the left margin is because Excel has considered them as alphanumeric data, text data. In 600 euros, logically, we might have wanted to enter the quantity 600, but in this case applied to the currency quantity, 600 euros. Excel in this case has a special way of entering it. For example, in this case, it would be 600 followed by the euro sign instead of the word euro. Here we see that it adjusts it to the right margin, which means that it has interpreted it as a numeric quantity. A numeric quantity 600. Lastly, we might want to enter headers for something that Excel is usually going to understand as a quantity. For example, if we enter 200, it is a numeric quantity, logically. If we want to introduce 200 but as a header, as a text data in order to then work with it using the text tools, we would have to precede it by the apostrophe. For example, apostrophe 200. In this case, Excel is going to understand it as text data, and we see this because it has adjusted it to the left of the cell. Here we see the difference between this 200 text format and this 200 numeric data. The same thing happens, for example, when we express a fraction, for example, a quarter. To represent it as text, we have to precede it by an apostrophe. Okay, and this is what Excel considers as alphanumeric data. The most important thing to realize is that the ones that Excel understands as alphanumeric as text will always be adjusted to the left of the cell, contrary to the numeric data, which, if we recall correctly, will always be adjusted to the right. That was all for today.